You probably haven't thought about your council in months. Maybe you noticed the potholes getting worse. Maybe your bin collection changed and nobody told you why. Maybe you drove past a library that used to be open and now isn't. But if someone asked you whether your council was financially healthy, you'd have no idea. Why would you? Councils don't make headlines. They don't do press conferences. They just quietly keep the streets clean and the streetlights on and hope nobody notices when things start to slip. Here's what's actually happening. Since 2018, 14 councils in England have effectively declared bankruptcy. That's the official term. A Section 114 notice, which means the council's finance officer has looked at the books and concluded that they cannot balance them, that spending will exceed income, that something has to break. Birmingham did it in 2023. The largest local authority in Europe, Nottingham, Woking, Thurrock, Croydon, twice. These aren't failing northern towns or obscure rural districts. These are major population centres serving millions of people, running out of money. And here's the part that should concern you. The Local Government Association estimates that almost 1 in 5 councils is now at risk of issuing a Section 114 notice, not in some distant future. Now. This year. Next year. The County Councils Network, which represents England's largest councils, published research showing that 26 of the 38 county and rural unitary authorities could be at risk of effective bankruptcy by 2027. That's nearly 3/4 of them. The potholes that used to get filled in a week now take 6 months, running services you don't think about until they disappear. And the strange thing is, most people won't notice until it's too late, because councils don't collapse dramatically. They don't shut down overnight. They erode, slowly, quietly, one service at a time. The library that used to be open 6 days a week now opens 3, then 2, then it closes for refurbishment and never reopens. The youth centre that kept teenagers off the streets gets defunded. The park maintenance team gets cut from 5 people to 2. None of this makes national news. None of it triggers emergency debates in Parliament. It just happens, incrementally, until one day you look around and realise that the place you live has been hollowed out. Havering Council, in East London, just approved the closure of 3 libraries: Harold Wood, South Hornchurch, Gidea Park. The decision was described as the hardest in the council's 60-year history. The leader said there was no alternative. He's probably right, because the council is borrowing £88 million just to balance its books this year. If it exceeds that, commissioners appointed by central government will take over and make even deeper cuts. That's the choice councils face now. Cut services yourself, or have someone else come in and cut them for you. North Somerset is consulting on closing libraries to save £433,000. Somerset itself needed £76.9 million in emergency financial support just to set a legal budget. Windsor and Maidenhead warned it was on the brink of effective bankruptcy last December. These aren't exceptional cases anymore. They're the pattern. And the question nobody seems to be asking is, how did we get here? Before we go further, if this is useful, consider subscribing. I make videos about the economics of living in Britain. No outrage, no spin, just how the systems that affect your life actually work. Right, let's talk about how councils ended up broke. Income must meet expenditure. Government grants, council tax, and business rates, that's it. Unlike central government, they can't borrow to cover day-to-day spending. They can't print money. They can't run deficits. Every year, by law, they have to set a balanced budget. For decades, that worked. Not perfectly, but it worked. Central government provided grants. Councils topped up with council tax. Services got delivered. Then came 2010. The coalition government decided that local government would bear a disproportionate share of austerity. Between 2010 and 2020, central government grants to councils were cut by 40% in real terms. 40%. From £46.5 billion down to £28 billion. To put that in perspective, if your salary was cut by 40%, you wouldn't be tightening your belt. You'd be losing your house. Councils couldn't lose their houses. They still had legal duties. They still had to collect bins, maintain roads, run social care, house homeless families. So they did what anyone would do. They cut everything that wasn't legally required. Parks, libraries, youth services, street cleaning, maintenance, planning departments, community centres, leisure facilities. The stuff that makes a place feel like somewhere worth living, that went first. The Institute for Fiscal Studies calculated that by 2019, council spending on services was 42% lower than it would have been if spending had kept pace with demand and costs since 2010. That's £24.5 billion in cuts and efficiencies, not over a decade, every single year. And the cuts weren't evenly distributed. London saw funding fall by 33%, the North West by 29%, the North East by 27%. The South East, already wealthier and less reliant on grants, saw cuts of 18%. The law says so, but here's where it gets structural. While grants were being slashed, demand for the services councils must provide was exploding. Adult social care, children's social care, homelessness, special educational needs, these aren't optional. If someone needs care, the council has to provide it, and the costs are enormous. Adult social care alone accounts for nearly 40% of upper-tier council spending. Children's services have seen demand surge. The number of children on education, health and care plans rose 62.7% between 2018 and 2024. Homelessness spending has increased by 77% since 2019. Temporary accommodation costs are through the roof, so councils face a squeeze from both directions. Less money coming in, more money required by law going out. And the gap, the funding gap, just keeps growing. The Local Government Association estimates councils face a shortfall of £2.3 billion in 2025 and 2026, rising to £3.9 billion in 2026 and 2027. That's a £6.2 billion hole over 2 years. Some councils tried to plug the gap by borrowing to invest. They bought shopping centres and office blocks, hoping the rental income would replace lost government funding. It worked for a while, then commercial property values collapsed. Woking ended up with debts of £2.4 billion, 100 times its annual budget. Thurrock lost hundreds of millions on investments that went wrong. Others just ran down their reserves. The rainy day fund. Except it's been raining for 15 years, and the fund is empty. The result is what we have now. A system where councils are legally required to balance their budgets, but mathematically cannot do so without either cutting services to the bone or effectively going bankrupt. And increasingly they're choosing bankruptcy. When a council runs out of money, it doesn't stop existing. It stops doing things. There's a hierarchy. Statutory services, the things councils are legally required to provide, get protected. Everything else becomes negotiable. Social care is statutory. Child protection is statutory. Housing homeless families is statutory. Collecting bins, technically, is statutory. But libraries, youth clubs, park maintenance, street cleaning beyond a basic minimum, swimming pools, community centres, arts funding, optional, discretionary, first on the chopping block. Since 2010, around 800 libraries have closed across England. A third of those remaining have had their hours cut, some by half. North Somerset is currently consulting on closing 3 more. Havering just approved the closure of 3. These decisions get made quietly, usually buried in budget documents that nobody reads until it's too late. Children's centres have been hollowed out. Research shows 285 have closed or merged since 2010, with over £82 million cut from budgets. Some councils are considering selling parks outright. Youth services have been devastated. Funding has fallen by 70% in some areas. The youth workers who used to run evening clubs and keep teenagers engaged, gone. The buildings sold off or repurposed. And then everyone wonders why antisocial behaviour is rising. Parks still exist, but barely. 86% of council parks departments have cut budgets. 81% have lost skilled staff. The flower beds that used to be maintained are now overgrown. Roads are falling apart. The backlog of pothole repairs in England is now measured in years, not months. The Royal Automobile Club reported a 40% increase in pothole-related breakdowns. Councils know the roads are crumbling, they just don't have the money to fix them. And this is before we get to the services that technically still exist, but have become so degraded they barely function. Planning departments are understaffed and overwhelmed. Applications that should take 8 weeks take 6 months. Housing developments stall. Businesses give up. The economy suffers in ways that never show up in council budget documents. Social care assessments have waiting lists stretching into months. Nearly 250,000 people are waiting to have their care needs assessed. Some of them will die before they reach the front of the queue. Housing services are drowning. The number of families in temporary accommodation has hit record highs. Councils are spending £604 million more on homelessness than they were in 2019, a 77% increase, and they're still not keeping up. The pattern is consistent. Councils protect what they're legally required to provide, strip everything else, and then watch the statutory services collapse under the weight of unmet demand that the preventative services use to address. It's a doom loop. Cut the youth service, and antisocial behaviour rises, and the police get more calls, and the courts get clogged, and the costs end up somewhere else in the public sector. Cut early intervention for families, and more children end up in care, which costs 10 times as much. Cut preventative health services, and more people end up in hospital. The savings aren't really savings, they're just costs moved somewhere else, usually somewhere more expensive. But by then, it's someone else's budget. There's one budget line that's threatening to take down the entire system. SEND, Special Educational Needs and Disabilities. If you don't have a child with special needs, you've probably never thought about it. But for councils, it's become an existential crisis. Here's how it works. If a child has special educational needs, they're entitled to an Education, Health and Care Plan, an EHCP. That plan sets out what support they need, and the council has to provide it. Not should provide or will try to provide, has to. It's a legal duty. The number of children on EHCPs has exploded, up 62.7% between 2018 and 2024. Some of that is better diagnosis. Some is rising complexity. Some is parents, understandably, fighting for support that mainstream schools can't provide. Whatever the cause, the cost has followed. When a child needs a specialist placement, a special school, often in the independent sector, the fees can run to £50,000, £80,000, even £100,000 a year, per child, and councils have to pay it. Add in home-to-school transport. If the nearest suitable school is 30 miles away, the council has to get the child there, every day. That alone can cost £20,000 a year per child. The result is that council SEND budgets are hemorrhaging money. Nationally, SEND deficits now stand at around £4 billion. By 2026, they're projected to hit £5.9 billion. For county councils alone, the figure is £2 billion, rising to £2.7 billion. And here's the catch. Currently, these deficits are being kept off councils' main books through an accounting mechanism called the statutory override. It's essentially a way of pretending the debt doesn't exist, for now. That override expires in March 2026. When it does, those deficits will hit councils' balance sheets overnight. The County Councils Network estimates that 18 councils would become insolvent immediately. Not gradually, not over time, overnight. A further 8 would be at serious risk within the following year. That's 26 of England's 38 largest councils potentially facing bankruptcy because of a single budget line. The government knows this is coming. Everyone knows this is coming. But so far there's no solution. No plan to write off the deficits. No fundamental reform of how SEND is funded. Just a cliff edge getting closer. Parents aren't the problem. They're doing what any parent would do, fighting for their child. The system that's supposed to support those children is the problem. It was never designed for this level of demand, never funded to meet it, and is now collapsing under the weight of its own obligations. Councils are caught in the middle, legally required to provide support, financially incapable of doing so, watching the deficits mount, knowing the override will expire, unable to do anything except wait for the crash. March 2026. That's the date. And nobody has a plan for what happens after. The government says it's fixing the problem. In November 2025, they announced reforms to council funding. New allocations based on deprivation data. More money for the poorest areas. A radical rebalancing to reverse years of unfair distribution. It sounds good. Some of it is good. The most deprived councils will see real terms funding increases of nearly 25% over the Parliament. That matters, but there's a catch. More money for some councils means less for others. 11 upper-tier councils will see their spending power fall in real terms by 2028-29. Wandsworth faces a cut of nearly 7%. Several London boroughs have been given special permission to raise council tax by more than 10% just to stay solvent. And even with the extra funding, the fundamental problem remains. Demand is rising faster than revenue. Social care costs keep climbing. Send deficits keep growing. Homelessness keeps getting worse. The local government association is clear. There is simply no more capacity for further cuts. Councils have already delivered £24.5 billion in efficiencies since 2010. The easy savings are gone. The difficult savings are gone. What's left is bone. Some councils will stabilise. The extra funding will buy time. The reforms will help match resources to need. But others won't make it. More Section 114 notices are coming. More commissioners appointed. More services stripped back to the legal minimum. And then beyond. The system isn't broken in the way a machine breaks. It's broken in the way a structure fails, slowly, under sustained pressure. Until one day, a crack appears that can't be patched. The question isn't whether more councils will go bankrupt. It's how many, and which ones. Here's the thing about councils. They're invisible when they work. You don't think about the bin collection until it doesn't happen. You don't notice the streetlight until it goes dark. You don't appreciate the library until the doors are locked and there's a for sale sign in the window. Councils are the background hum of a functioning society. The stuff you take for granted, the stuff that makes a place feel looked after, cared for, worth living in. And that hum is getting quieter. Not everywhere, not all at once, but steadily. Town by town, service by service, cut by cut. The park's a little more neglected, the roads a little more broken, the waiting lists a little longer, the buildings a little shabbier, the sense, hard to pin down but impossible to ignore, that things are slowly falling apart. This isn't an accident. It's the result of choices made over 15 years. Choices to cut funding. Choices to shift costs onto councils without shifting resources. Choices to protect some budgets while hollowing out others. The people who made those choices won't feel the consequences. They don't use council services. They don't live in the places where the cuts land hardest. They won't notice when the youth centre closes, or the library shuts, or the social worker's caseload doubles. But you might, because your council, wherever you are, is operating on margins that barely exist, balancing books that don't balance, protecting services it can't afford, hoping that next year will be different, knowing it probably won't. The question isn't whether your council is struggling, it's whether you'll notice before it's too late.